This shir, HaShem, we're going to be giving a shir on the hidden righteous tzadikim from the previous generations. I think it's very important because we know that stories of tzadikim really give us a lot of strength, a lot of chizuk in serving HaShem through love and through yira and through fear. And it really gives us an idea that even in these generations, it's not the Baal Shem Tov's times, but even in our generations, there are people who are able to do incredible things because they're closest to HaShem. I'd like to start off with one of the tzadikim that I feel, first of all, very close to these tzadikim, because actually one of my friends in yeshiva actually became religious because of this tzadik about 25-30 years ago, I'd say. And my father had a very, very close friend that was passed away at a young age also. He was very, very close to him, so I've heard a lot about him. I have a picture over here about this tzaddik. His name is Rebbe Fish. Rebbe Fish was also known as the builder of the Banai. Why? Many of the hidden righteous tzaddikim, they weren't rabbis of big yeshivot. They were very, very simple, quote unquote. That's the point. They were hidden, and they had regular jobs. His job was he was a builder, so they called him Rebbe Fish, the builder. But this is a picture of Rebbe Fish, if you can see over here. So I'd like to start talking about Rebbe Fish. Now you may ask me a few questions. One is, if I know so much about him and people know about him, so how is he hidden? Hidden means that people don't really know about him. So the answer is a few things. One answer is that most of the things that all these stories that came out, many of them were after he passed away, so people were able to reveal. But during his lifetime, he didn't let people reveal. Another answer is that in the times of the Vilna Gaon, the famous Vilna Gaon, they asked the Vilna Gaon, so they asked somebody, in the times of the Vilna Gaon, a big tzaddik, who are the big lamav of tzaddikim? So he revealed to them a few of them, and he said one, and then he said the number 2 to the highest, and he said number 3 is the Vilna Gaon. So the person turned to the tzaddik and said, Vilna Gaon? Who never heard of the Vilna Gaon? Everybody heard of the Vilna Gaon. How's he hidden? So he laughed and he said, if you only knew who the Vilna Gaon is, you'd realize how hidden he is. Meaning that such tzaddikim, even though they're famous in the world, you don't even know a little bit of their greatness. So could be the same idea, but here in true, from what I understand, is that most of the stories came out after he passed away. Now, much of his childhood is not much recorded and not much known, besides for a few things. He was born in Europe, in a city called Stettin, to his father's name was Rebbe Yosef Chaim Fish. Rebbe Yosef Chaim Fish was the head of the Rebbe Kadisho. Rebbe Kadisho is, we know in Judaism, when a person passes away, there's a burial process. There's also to be matar the guf, the body. They sharpen the net, they cut the nails, they shave the hair, and there's a whole process. And his father was the head of them, taking care of the burial plots and selling place in the cemetery and all that. Just to show what household he came from. One time somebody came to his father to buy a plot of land, and his father sold the plot of land. That was his father's job. As we know, life goes on. This person who bought the plot of land passed away. The father of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Fish brought the body, this nifter, to bury him in the place where he bought from him. Out of nowhere, when they come, something very unusual. Somebody was already buried there. Somebody beat him to the chase. Somebody took the plot of land already. So now you have a very, very difficult thing what to do. One is, on one hand, it's rightfully his, he bought it. But on the other hand, you have somebody buried already, who knows how many years. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim Fish went over to the place where the person was buried, and he whispered onto the place where the person was buried, for your good, it would be good for you to move because this person rightfully bought this place and it's his. Now, most people would see that, would be like, this person lost his marbles, like, who's he talking to? But the minute he said that, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the caver of this person, the burial plot of this person physically moved by itself to a different place and created an empty place, and they buried the person. Now this story, how do we know this story of Rebbe Fish? Zatzal said he told over the story about his father to the Helager of Moshe Mordechai of Lelev. Now Moshe Mordechai of Lelev was from the biggest righteous holy people 50 years ago, or 40, 50 years ago in Bnei Brak. I've heard from the Chelban or from other big righteous tzaddikim that said that he was able to fly, to do unbelievable things. He was a malach. So Ram said this story, and that's how we know this story. Just to show amazing that he grew up in such a household. he grew up before the war. He was born a little bit before World War II. During World War II, as we know, the Nazis came into the towns and they started extinguishing, they started liquidating the ghettos and unfortunately extinguishing the fire of Yiddishkeit, and by unfortunately killing in the most bizarre ways. Now, before they started the concentration camps, which opened up in 1942, in the beginning right away, what they would do is how they murdered the Jews. Hashem should, B'ezrat Hashem, raise up their blood, Hashem yikam damav. They would line up the Jews by a wall, and they would have a firing squad, and they'd fire away with their machine guns, and unfortunately, Hashem Yishmar killed many Jews at once. They took Avram Fish as a child, they rounded him up with all his friends and in his neighborhood, and all the people, and they put them against the wall, in a room. They lined up, a few Nazi Germans spread out, and they started shooting away with their machine guns and killing. They were about to come to Avram Fish when he was a child, a little bacher, a little kid, maybe 8, 9. All of a sudden, he was the next person online, all of a sudden, boom. The electricity burst, and the whole place became dark, and everybody started screaming, and the Germans lost, their focus, and he had time to run out of a window. We see how Hashem everything is from Hashem. Now, of course, the other Yidden also, we don't know the Cheshbonis why or Dafka Avram Fish, but we see later on that it was Baruch Hashem that Hashem saved him, from the stories that we'll see. And we see that's already a miracle that was done to him as a child. Now, many years later, when he was living in Eretz Yisrael in Tel Aviv, he used to have his famous Melava Malka, which we'll speak about. One time by the Melava Malka, a very, very well-dressed person walked in, and he didn't look like he was from the religious sect. And he strides in, he sits down, and he's staring at Avram Fish, and he's drinking in his wisdom from his speech and looking at him. People always get curious, and somebody walks over to him and says, "Excuse me, sir, Chabibi, Kilo, what's going on over here? What are you doing here?" In a nice way, in a polite, positive way. He says, "I'll tell you the truth. My father told me that whoever you stayed next to Avram Fish during World War II was always saved. How could I not go and see such a tzaddik like this, that no matter what, as long as you're with him, you were saved because of his merit?" Now, in those days, there was a famous head of the Lama of Tzadikim. He was the head of the Lama of Tzadikim. His name was the Sandler. He was the shoemaker. Now, in every Lama of Tzadikim, there's 35, and in 36, there's the head, the number one, and they hand it over to the one that they feel. In his days, the number one tzaddik, his name was Rav Rabikov. His name was the Sandler. He was a shoemaker. Maybe one day we'll give a share. There's many stories on him also. When Rav Fish came to Eretz Yisrael, after he came from Europe, from the war-torn Europe, he made sure to hide himself. Well, this is the reason why he's one of the hidden tzaddikim. He made sure to hide himself. So for work, what did he do? We spoke that he became a builder. But what did he do? When he used to finish working, it was later revealed that every night, every afternoon, he used to run to a certain shul, and he used to learn privately all Kabbalah and deep things with the Ari Hakadosh. And most people didn't even know about it until, like we said, later on the stories happened. One time, what's interesting is, because the Sandler knew of his godless, because the head of the Lama of Tzadikim knows who the others are, obviously, and they also learned together, like we just said. He used to send people to Rav Fish, brachas. The Sandler sometimes sent to Rav Fish. Many things in the Lama of Tzadikim is that a lot of Lama of Tzadikim, each one had their individual strength, and each tzaddik had his thing that he was able to help another yid for. So sometimes he used to stand Avram Fish. When these people used to come to Avram Fish's house, he used to act like he was crazy, completely crazy. He wanted people to think he was a nut job. He used to scream, he used to go crazy, he used to make crazy things, faces, they thought he was nuts. So they came back to the Sandler, they told him, to the shoemaker, to the head of the Lama Tzadikim, they said, "You're sending us to somebody that's crazy." He said, next time you go to him, make sure that when he's acting crazy and he's throwing you out of his house, like, "What do you want from me?" You'll see that during that he'll say, "Kol Yeshuas," or he'll say, "B'ezrat Hashem," he'll give you a little bracha. And they realized that every time they went, he would scream, make it crazy, but he'd add on a few words to give them a blessing or a bracha, a blessing on the thing that they needed most. And always some crazy miracle happened. So people started realizing that this is the real deal, and Rav Fish was really one of them, and the Sandler knew exactly what he was talking about. One time, after he became famous already in his older age, that he started learning that he learned with the Sandler when they were, years before, and they were big, they were learning Kabbalah and huge aspects. They came over to a fish once, and they started to their fish, and they started telling to our fish, started saying to him, Rav, we heard that you used to learn with the Sandler. He used to look at them, he says, with all seriousness, like it was unbelievable. He said, I learned with his son a little bit. I don't really know him. I knew his son Yassel or Rabbi Yosef. We used to learn a little bit together in shul, but he always made sure to hide himself. One time, one of the people that was very close to him decided to, to do a chap, and he went over to me and said, I heard that when you already started walking, when you used to walk with a stick, later on when he was older, he used to walk around the stick. He said, you used to walk around the stick, I heard you used to go to a certain shul and learn and talk to the Sandler. He said, what do you mean? Way before I used to walk with a stick. And then he realized that the person did this whole thing, that in order he should say that. So he turned to him, he said to this person who was close to him, he said, you should be a detective for the police. So we know he had also a very, very, very big sense of humor. Now, how did he become famous? Meaning, how did he become a little famous? What happened was, in his time, the Gadol Ador of the door was the Baba Sali. Yisrael Abu Chatzir, the famous Baba Sali. Now, the Baba Sali's Gabbai, whose name was Rabbi Leo Al-Fasi, said this story over. He said that I was there when the Baba Sali turned to us and said, go to Rehov Kalasha, which is in Tel Aviv, look for the builder named Avram Fish, and tell him that I say to him it's time that he starts revealing himself and give berachot. He should stop blessing people. People should come to him for blessings. At that point, people know who's Avram Fish, who's the Bana. They didn't know what he's talking about. But the Baba Sali, we know the Baba Sali knew what he had to know. They came to the street and they're looking for the door and this and that, the place. Nothing, they can't find anything. Finally, they see one of the window shades open a little peep. And all of a sudden, somebody screams down and says, oh, you're looking for Avram Fish, the builder. So they said, yeah. He said, oh, come on up, he's here. And they came up, they realized that this was Avram Fish himself, the builder. That's how you eat? Avram Fish, the builder, yeah, I'm here, And then when they said from the Baba Sali, even though the Baba Sali wanted him to reveal himself, in the beginning he didn't oblige. He did not want to oblige, he couldn't. He said, I can't, who am I to reveal myself? He looked at himself like he was literally dirt, he was nothing. He said, I'd rather people look at me that I'm crazy, like we know he was acting crazy before we said the story from the shoemaker, and then some tzaddik or a builder, instead of some tzaddik, well, what do I need this for? Until one time, the Baba Sali, before the Baba Sali passed, and he was nifta, the Baba Sali turned to him and said, listen, if you don't stop giving brachas and blessing people, I'm taking you with me. Meaning, your time has come. He said, the reason why you're living now is to help Am Yisrael. So he realized he was forced to start revealing himself because the Baba Sali says something, you listen to the Baba Sali. So that's when he started revealing himself. Now, so people heard that the Baba Sali, Avram Fish, the builder in Tel Aviv, nobody ever heard it. Everybody, all the internet style, well there wasn't internet, but in the mikvah, everybody's talking in the mikvah, this guy turns, it's a big Tzaddik, Avram Fish, everybody says, I want to go see the builder. So everybody starts running to Tel Aviv, from Bnei Brak, Yerushalayim, everybody starts running from Petach Tikva, from all over the Yerushalayim, from all over Eretz Yisrael. Start coming, and the Baba Sali made him, so there's nothing he can do. So, one time he said to them, he said to the people coming, I just don't understand, why are you coming to me? So, that's how he really looked at it. He knew why, but he was literally like, what do you want from me? Who am I? No, nothing, I'm nothing. So one time, he literally asked, he said, what do you want from me? They said, the Baba Sali sent us to you. So all he did was, he just started bursting out. He said, meaning like, to make, to make fun of himself. What's the Baba Sali want from me? Like, who am I? You see, most people, unfortunately, the Baba Sali says to people, go to them, they feel on cloud 9, as you would say. They're floating. The opposite. It was a bother for him. What do I need this for? Not because because he actually looked at himself like he wasn't fit. Now, the big thing by him was his Melava Malka on Motzei Shabbos. Melava Malka was a special time, as we'll see in later on. The Melava Malka, he did unbelievable miracles and unbelievable things that he saw, and people saw it. He showed people. He opened up their eyes. He was able to show people ruchnis, unbelievable things. But Motzei Shabbos was the big thing. He would set up the table like it was Shabbos, and beautiful cups, silver cups. I mean, there's pictures all over that people have from later on surfaced. Pictures that were surfacing, that were going around, that surfaced, and beautiful candles, candlesticks, just unbelievable. He had something with Melava Malka, beautiful. His Melava Malka started 10 or 11 o'clock at night, Motzei Shabbos, no matter which Motzei Shabbos, didn't matter. And he would always light neiros for David HaMelech, for Mashiach, and for other tzadikim, which I saw later on. It says later on, but I saw they used to light for Rebbe Nachman of Breslev. We know Rebbe Nachman of Breslev says, whoever lights a ner for me, it says they bring it out from Tuesday, but it seems from Avram Fish, the Hidra Motzei Shabbos, it means anytime. He says, I'll do you big favors from the upper worlds. And he used to light for one of the Stechiner Rebbes from the previous generations. Now, and after he lit the neiros, about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, he would start the meal. He would pour a lot of, he'd pour other people drinks. He would pour arak and whiskey and all types of drinks, and it was beautiful, mamish beautiful. He would sing Zmiris, and it was an incredible atmosphere. I've heard this personally from people. Now, after Zmiris, what he did was he had 13 bottles on his table of whiskey. Why 13? He had 13 exactly that matches the 13 attributes, godly attributes of Rachamim. We know that Kel Archapayim Atal, like when Tefillah we say every day by Tachanun. We know that there is 13 attributes of that we say HaShem of Rachmanis, HaShem shall have pity on us. So the 13 bottles. These 13 bottles, they used to pour to people, was called the what? The drink medicine. Whoever drank it, any sickness he had went away right away. And Avram Fish himself told the people that whoever drinks in this the next whole week until the next month's Shabbos, nobody has to take any pills for anything. This is equivalent to the best pills. These are the tzadikim, that something from a drink they could turn into such a ruchnius thing that could heal everybody. What's interesting is one of the Motzei Shabbosim, Avram came over to one of the people that was there in Melava Malka, and he whispered in his ear, and he said, "No knife will pass over you." No knife will pass over you. You can imagine the person was very intrigued, very worried, like, who gives a bracha like that? But Avram continued singing and made nothing like it. That week he was driving in the Shomron, in Samurai, I think in English, the Shomron, and all of a sudden surrounds his car a band of Arabs. A group of Arabs, and they start waving knives at him, they jump on his car. Unfortunately, we know too many stories, how these stories end. These stories end over there, meaning out of nowhere, for no sort of reason, he didn't honk, he didn't start acting crazy, nothing, he didn't have a gun, nothing. They all looked at each other, startled, and all ran away. He's thinking to himself, what just happened? There's an officer, nothing. Then he realized that's what Avram Fish was saying. Avram Fish by Melava Malka, the few days before, already saw what's going to happen to him, and already took care of him that nothing's going to happen, and that's why he promised him that no knife is going to go over to you. After that, the time they became famous, so people were coming over to him during the week. Although his house was open to everybody. After all, he opened his house to everybody. He always had on his table a bowl full of garlic. He always had garlic on the table. He said anybody who asked for bracha used to give garlic to him. And he said he would give a tooth of garlic, as we know, and a coin. And he used to give him also a kapitel of Tehillim to say 3 times a day. And he said, whoever does this and asks HaShem a request, the request will be granted. As you can imagine, not enough stories, meaning every day more stories came out that people were saved by this garlic. And Avram used to say over that the Baal Shem Tov himself, Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh also, he used to say, the Baal Shem Tov also used to give out coins, so what do I care to give out coins? Meaning, again, to be mezalzel, to make himself low, like he's not worth anything, but the Baal Shem Tov did it, so then obviously it's worth something. As we know, of course, that when he gave it, it was b'schuto, because he was a kadosh, also Avram Fish. Usually when he used to walk into Avram's house, this is incredible, he used to have one sefer on the table. We know many people walk into a tzaddik's house, they see, thousands and thousands from. They used to have one sefer, a storyteller. There was a book on stories of Baal Shem Tov. And he used to make like, this is the only thing he knows how to learn. He doesn't know how to learn. What does he know? He knows a few stories, nice stories of Baal Shem Tov that he heard, and he this, and people wrote it. Nothing big. Of course, we know that he knew everything. In fact, one of his close students, his name was Rabbi Shua Me'imi, said that he used to sometimes sneak up on him and hear him saying over and pages of Gemara, word for word, by heart. Yes. Now, there were times also where he used to do an amazing. He used to come to shul, and he used to take the siddur, and we used to read from the siddur upside down. So people should think he's crazy. He's out of his mind. Like every single kid knows how to look at the siddur properly. So these are the stories. These are what he used to do. He said these are tremendous embarrassments. Who can actually do that? Walk into a shul and make himself feel so low in front of people that he turns the siddur and reads it backwards. Incredible. We're talking about somebody who knew, like we just said, everything. He learned with the shoemaker. We said the shoemaker was the biggest Kabbalist. Now, one time, there was a big tzaddik over there. In his days, his name was Rav Mendel. Rav Mendel lived in Bnei Brak. Somebody came to Rav Mendel and he said, Rav Mendel told him, travel to Tel Aviv, look over there for Rav Avram, the builder, who makes himself like he's crazy, but know that he's big and huge and hidden. He was so hidden from people. He'd walk the streets, he would talk to himself. He'd go to the shul, he'd just sit upside down. I mean, you can imagine the embarrassments he took on himself. But as we know, when somebody's kadosh and somebody's holy, after a while, the secret gets out. Baruch HaShem for us. One time, on Motzei Shabbos by Melava Malka, just to show his how he made himself like he's a nothing, he was sitting at a table by Melava Malka. So one of the people sitting there opened up a Mishnayos in the middle. He started learning some Mishnayos. So Avram, who made himself always like one of these people off the streets that had no chassidus, he wasn't machshav learning or anything. He turned to the Jew that was learning, and he said, over here we just eat and drink. We don't learn over here in this house. We just eat and drink. So just to show again, the amazing things. There were times that he literally, there were people that come to him for brachis, and he would scream at them, I'm crazy, I'm a sinner, I play with cards, I'm a card player. He used to pull out a pack of cards and show them they place cards. He did anything he can in order to run away, that people should not hold of him as anything, because he looked at himself, and he offered the Ephra, I'm dust, I'm nothing, there's only the Rabbanu Shalom. One time he said, like we know, he did reveal snippets of his caliber, of his hugeness. He one time said, why in this Gilgal, why in this reincarnation is he a builder? He said about himself, he said, well, in the previous reincarnation, he was also, he had the responsibility of building a building, on the workers that were building a building. And what happened was, he kind of fired a few builders, a few of them, and wasn't for the right reason, and therefore he had to come back in this reincarnation and to fix this, that he fired a few workers. That's why he came back in this, just to show that he knew his own Gilgal, why he came down and listened to this thing. Only the biggest Tzadikim knew. Now, just to show a little bit about his chesed that he did, he was known as Mamash as Sar HaChesed B'dor Acharon. He was known literally as the master of kindness in the last generation. His famous thing that he did was, he used to, every new married couple, he would give them a refrigerator and an oven for free. One time he said, I'm not scared of hell. Why? We know that Arizal says there's two types of hells. There's a hell that's fire and a hell that there's snow. He said, if I go to the hell that's fire, I'll have all the refrigerators that I gave to all the new married couples to cool me off. And if I go to the shelet, to the snow, then I'll have all the ovens to warm me up. from all his chesed. They asked him, how many did you give out? He said, I don't know, but 32 years I keep on giving and giving and giving. I lost count. In fact, all the miracles that he did, that the Melava Rebbe, Mordechai Lelev said on him, it's not a pella, it's not a wonder how he does all these miracles. Like we know it says, right? But it says what? It says like this. It says in the pasuk, somebody who plants charities, that means he's constantly doing charities, he's the one who could be matzmiach yeshua. He is the one who can what? He can do unbelievable miracles, unbelievable miracles. Now, to say a few stories, unbelievable stories, some more stories. One time during the Melava Malka, which was his famous thing, came in a Jew with his daughter that was deaf in one ear. His daughter was deaf in one ear. Rav Avram sat in front of the daughter, right in front of her, and he started to sing time after time, Rachin b'chazdecho al amcha tzurenu ben David avdecha yavi v'galenu. You know the famous pasuk, right? It says on HaShem, have mercy on your and b'chazdecha al amcha tzurenu, that have mercy and kindness on your nation, meaning us, Am Yisrael, and that Ben David Mashiach could come into to redeem us. Out of nowhere, all of a sudden, the child started screaming, I hear everything, I hear. Koyach of a tzaddik, that his torah, his singing, his torah can heal physical things. Another time, Melava Malka, when he was giving out the drinks, we said, for the 13 bottles, he came to one of the people that was sitting there to pour him a glass. And again, he turned to him and he gave him a bracha, then no knife will pass over you. Another story, no knife will pass over you. What's going on? A few days later, he became sick with something very serious. And the doctors basically told him he needs surgery, a serious surgery. Okay. A few days later, he came back to the doctors, and the doctors looked and said everything became good again. Crazy, serious, and he realized that's what he was talking about. No knife, no surgery is going to be needed for you. You're okay because you had a drink from one of my bottles. One time, there was a person that came to Tel Aviv, where he was living, to Rav with his daughter. One of his children, to Melava Malka. He said to Rav Remel, he said, my child already for a few weeks is blind in both eyes. And the doctors are astounded, and they do not know the cause of it. They have no idea. So he asked Rav Ram, is there something that the tzaddik can do for me? B'ezrat HaShem. Rav Ram took from one of the bottles of 13, and he poured into a cup. And he said to the person, take from this wine, from this drink, rub it around the child's eyes, smear it around the eyes, and everything will be okay. The person, is this going to help from blindness? He started smearing it. Kid says, I see. And he started explaining and saying everything that's going on in the room. It's like koyach of tzadikim. It's the koyach, the strength of people that are humble. They attach themselves to HaShem only. They're able to do things like you hear from 300 years ago in the Baal Shem Tov's times. One time in the summertime, during Melava Malka, it was very, very hot. As we know, in those days there was no air conditioner. And Tel Aviv is extremely swampy, and it's just terrible. And a bachur, that was a bacher came, a young bacher came, Teimani, a Yemenite bacher came, and that spoke Yiddish, but nobody knew he spoke Yiddish because he was Teimani, Yemenite, but he spoke Yiddish because he learned in a Ashkenaz yeshiva, and he learned Yiddish over there. He was sitting there with his hat and jacket, respectfully, but the heat got to him, like any normal human being. And he took his hat off to cool off a little bit. Rav Ram came over to him quietly and said to him, do you know that David HaMelech is sitting here with us right now? How could you take off your hat when David HaMelech is sitting with us? That's what he said to him. He said, The fact that he said that David HaMelech was here, that's not even the biggest wonder. That he was there, but the biggest wonder was that he told it to me in which language? In Yiddish. He said, which human being on planet Earth would say to a Yemenite boy in Israel something in Yiddish? That's like telling over to somebody that lives in China, like, what shaykh? What does it do with Yiddish? That was his Ruach HaKodesh, and he knew this Bachar spoke Yiddish, and he was able to talk to him and tell him over in Yiddish. Because we know Avram's main language was Yiddish, because he came from Europe. One time by Melava Malka, there were a couple of Jews sitting at the end of the table over there, and they started speaking about the different, the elections, and politics, and the Israeli politics, nothing bad, just things that weren't had to do with Melava Malka. All of a sudden, Avram turned to them and said, politics next to David HaMelech? Over here, you're speaking politics? The biggest wonder was, again, not just that David HaMelech was there, nobody else heard. Everybody else that was sitting in between where Avram sat and them didn't hear, but he heard from the other side of the table. That's a tzaddik. He has spiritual hearing, spiritual seeing, spiritual knowledge, everything. There were many stories like this, that people started talking, and those were the times when he got angry and people were speaking in Melava Malka. He was very patient, but he said, how could you speak when David HaMelech is sitting and talking to me now and learning? How could you speak when David HaMelech is sitting here and enjoying from my Melava Malka? This is somebody that lived 30, 40 years ago. Just to say over a story about a hidden tzaddik with David HaMelech, I'd like to say something amazing. There was a tzaddik named Ari Avrich. He lived about 50 years ago. I heard the story from a makubal named Rav Shani, who lives here in Eretz Yisrael. His grandfather actually was one of the heads of the Melava Tzadikim before the Sandler, Chacham Menashe. He was famous. He said the story that he used to go every once a Shabbos to Kever David HaMelech to eat Melava Malka with this Rav Uri. Rav Uri was a very, very hidden tzaddik. And 50 years ago, we know now it's even hard to get to David HaMelech, but even 50 years ago it was torture to get there. Just to get there was 2 buses, and it wasn't like today where the roads were like going down and up. It was very hard. And every Matzah Shabbos, Rav Uri was there, sitting there with a smile, shining and beaming. So Rav Shani said one day, I asked Rav Uri, and I said to him, Rav Uri, what's the reason, especially in the winter, it's so cold, what's the reason why you come here every Matzah Shabbos? It's somebody your age, it's so cold. Maybe stay at home. There's no chiyuv, there's no obligation to eat here in Melava Malka. Why do you come over here to David HaMelech every week? So Rav Uri said to him, I'll tell you why. When I was younger, I one time wanted to go to Har Zion, which is where David HaMelech was, but in those days, Har Zion was in the hands of the Jordanians. It was in the hands of the Arabs. But I said to myself, I'm going to go. And Hashem's going to help me. Everybody said he's crazy. He went. He comes to David HaMelech and he starts davening and saying Tehillim and davening and saying Tehillim, and he's eating Melava Malka, and he started singing, and all of a sudden he hears a commotion. He hears all of a sudden Arabic and Jordanians saying, that's it. And he knew enough Arabic to understand, from those days, to understand that they said one to another, let's go kill a Jew. Dirty Jew, whatever. All of a sudden, he realized that they had to go around to get into the building. He heard from the window they had to go around. He had enough time to run up the tower, the Migdal David, the tower of David HaMelech. People who have been there, they'll know what I mean. But he doesn't know what to do. He hears them climbing up, and he doesn't know what to do. This is Rav Uri Avrich, who's saying the story over to Rav Shani. When I heard this from Rav Shani, he starts davening, he starts preparing himself for, that's it, Shema Yisrael. Out of nowhere, all of a sudden, he sees somebody. He sees somebody with a crown, he sees somebody in long robes, and he sees a spiritual human being. And he says, the person says, I'm David HaMelech. Because you had such Mesirat Nefesh to come to me when nobody else came, I'm going to help you and I'm going to save you. And he said, close your eyes. He said to Rav Uri, close your eyes. David HaMelech said to Rav Uri, close your eyes. Close his eyes. And then all of a sudden he heard Rav Uri, he heard David HaMelech say to him, open your eyes. He opened his eyes and he found himself on Shmuel Navi, the other side of Yerushalayim was. He said David HaMelech picked him up and brought him over and split up a second somewhere else. So he turned to Rav Shani, he said, I was zurich to see David HaMelech. David HaMelech saved my life. Am I not going to come every week to show my gratitude to David HaMelech? That's the power of hidden tzadikim. They have Gilui Daven HaMelech. There's another story that I heard from Rav Shani Shlita. Rav Shani said there was a famous tzaddik named Chacham Sasson. He was one of the biggest mukubalim from Yeshivat Porat Yosef many 50 years ago. He was very close to the hidden tzaddikim also. He was close with the big tzaddikim, Rav Mutzafim, and many big tzaddikim. One time there was a child in the neighborhood. They lived in the Bukharim, in the Bukharim neighborhood near Malcha Yisrael, near Yecheskel. And the story got around afterwards. There was a boy that was a teenager that went one day to Daven HaMelech, and he's climbing up Daven HaMelech, and the hill to walk up in those days was about 45 minutes it took. And he's getting there, and he had a thing that his father always told him. His father's yahrzeit every year came on Erev Yom Kippur. His father asked him, his last wish, his dying wish was, son, every Yom Kippur please light a candle in Daven HaMelech's kever, and then go home and eat for you. You have a mitzvah to eat, and just make sure you come and light a candle. That's all I want from you. Child every year went. It was difficult because it's Erev Yom Kippur, and there's a lot of mikvah, and there's this and that. But every year he made it. This year, same thing. He starts walking up to Kever Daven HaMelech, the whole hill, and all of a sudden he sees this old lady crouched, holding a huge basket, and she turns to him like, in this type of voice, an old lady, can you please help me all the way to? He starts making a cheshbon. He says, why? How am I going to do everything, lighting, coming and going? But he said, there's a reason he helped her. It probably took an hour and a half, who knows how long to get there. He gets there. He helped her all the way up. He gets there and he lights the ner. He says a few kapitel tehillim, the whole thing. Everything has to do. All of a sudden, he comes out and he doesn't know what. He walks down the hill, which took him about a half hour, and the lady's there with the basket. And he's shocked. What's going on? He doesn't ask questions. He's in a rush. He didn't have time to ask. The lady turns to him and says again, can you please help me to my house? He says, where do you live? Maybe he lives in there. She lives in the neighborhood. She says, no, I live on the other side of Yerushalayim. I live in Beit Lechem, by Kever Rachel. I live on near there. Near Kever Rachel over there. He says, oh my gosh. He says, it's one thing I helped her up to Daven HaMelech, but I got a few hours, mikvah, tikkun this, tikkun that, all the things you have to say. He says, I'm sorry, excused himself politely, and he went home. He came to shul, and Chacham Sasson, he went to Chacham Sasson and he told over the story to Chacham Sasson. He said, listen, this lady, I helped her up, and then she somehow was down there much quicker than me, which I have no idea how, and then she asked me to take her to Kever Rachel, Beis Lechem, she lived near the Kever Rachel. Chacham Sasson says, this was in, I'll tell you what year, this was in 1966, the year before the 67 war where the Jews conquered everything, where the Israelis conquered from the Arabs. This is the year before. Chacham Sasson said to the kid, he said, next year, all the Jews will be able to go to Kever Rachel. Why that year? Another reason why he didn't want to go was because he was scared because of the Arabs, but also because of Tani, but also because of the Arabs. And he said to Chacham Sasson, by next year, in 67, in Tov Shin Chav Zayin, it will be clear. Now, if you told somebody a year before that they would be able to go to Kever Rachel, they'd look at you like you're crazy. They were barely able to go to 20 feet further. This was on the other side of Yerushalayim, miles and miles of the Arab. Like what? So he asked Chacham Sasson, and they started asking people that were there, how do you know? He said, because this person just met Rachel Imenu. It was Rachel Imenu herself, the Mama Rachel. And the Rachel Imenu asked you to bring her to Kever Rachel. If you would have obliged and said yes, she would have brought you to Kever Rachel in less than 2 minutes. It would have took chit-chat. You would have been zeichet to daven in Kever Rachel, and nobody was able to. But nevertheless, even though you weren't able to, she came to give us a sign that by next year, we'll be able to go and daven by her. And exactly what happened. In 1967, the Jews, Baruch HaShem, were able to go and conquer, and they were able to go miles down to go to visit the Mama Rachel, our holy matriarch, Rachel Imenu. Now, I'd like to say a few more stories. So a few more things from Avram Fish. After the Baba Sali told people to go to Avram Fish, one time Avram Fish said like this. It was very unusual for him to say, but like I said before, there were times that he gave a little bit of what his greatness. He said in this language, in this lashon, he said, whoever comes to my Melava Malka on Motzei Shabbos, who kvar gehelfener. What does that mean, gehelfener? That means he's saved. Saved from what? He said, I will take him out from Gehenna. I will take this person out, I will save him from Gehenna. In what merit? In all the refrigerators and all the ovens that I gave to all the new couples. That's what he said. Now, there are many times that in the middle of davening, in the middle of Tehillim, he'd start crying like a baby. And then a half hour later, he'd start dancing. And the people that were close to him had the guts to ask him. And he said, half hour ago, there was supposed to be a big pigua, a big terrorist attack. Half hour later, I was able I erased it. So I was jumping from happiness that in Shamayim they let me erase it. One Shabbos, they saw the Rav was very, 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 very sad. The whole night and day. They couldn't believe it. He was a tzaddik. We know tzaddik on Shabbos always happy, and they couldn't get him to be happy. Not at night, not during the day of Shabbos, nothing was helping. That week was a very, 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 very big tragedy. That a bus got caught in the train tracks, and the train hit the bus, and many, many young children unfortunately passed away from that tragedy. It was a very, very, very famous tragedy that happened in Eretz Yisrael. And they understood then that the tzaddik already saw, and unfortunately he wasn't able to be involved in this gezerah. This is, like we know, everything HaShem does is for the best. We don't ask questions. Sometimes the tzaddik is able to because that's what HaShem wants. Sometimes the tzaddik is not able to because that's the day. We see the Ruach HaKodesh that he had. Another story was another Shabbos also. They were very, 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 very astonished to see him also. He was crying and he was very, very sad the whole Shabbos. And that week also there was a big terrorist attack called the Kastel that was near Yerushalayim. In Kastel, it's a city outside Yerushalayim, and one of the terrorists blew up a bus, and many people were killed. And again, he foresaw these things, but sometimes, like we know, the Rebbe Nachman knows best, and the Tzadikim can't be mevatel, but we have no idea the tens and tens of millions and ensof that they were mevatel for us, Baruch HaShem, through their love of HaShem, through their love of us, because so much they love us that they do anything. They give as many tzadikim given years of their life off for other Jews to live, because that's their love for another soul, another Jew. One time, somebody came to eat the morning meal by Rav Fish, and Rav Fish looked at him, at the person that was eating by him, and he said, with this meal, with the food on this meal I'm being right now, I'm fixing 3 reincarnations that are reincarnated in this food. So the godless of a tzaddik. He used to, on Thursday nights after learning, he used to give out bagels, hot bagels, and he used to sit over each bagel and do tremendous kavanas. He used to say that he was being mitakim reincarnations. You know, like the Arizal says, that many reincarnations come in the form of food, and you just need to make a bracha, but the tzaddik is able to bring them much higher, because not just the bracha, they have tremendous intentions. One time, there was a girl that lived in Eretz Yisrael, an Israeli girl, that traveled to London to find work. She didn't find work, so she came back to Eretz Yisrael, to her parents' house, and she came to her fish for a bracha, to find her zivug. Out of nowhere, the Rav said to her, she never met him, he never met her. He said to her, go back to London. That's where your husband is. Meaning that's where your future husband is. But because it was right after Purim, she said, I'll stay for Pesach in Eretz Yisrael, meet the family. After Pesach, I'll go to London, and okay. She took it a little more lightly. Rav looked and said, don't even wait one day. Go back now. Make Pesach over there, and over there, Pesach over there, you'll also do Pesach, because there's Jews over there that also do Pesach. She said, you know what, I have amunas chachamim, belief in the chachamim. She listened to him. She traveled to London, back. Before she even came off the plane, she already got a job. Mischus Tzadik. Shabbos, before even Pesach, she got invited to a certain family. That's why, so she shouldn't be alone for Shabbos. And from what? Over there, they set her up with one of the boys of the house. They went out and they got engaged and they got married. And that was literally before Pesach already. That's why Avram knew already that she has to go back. Because Avram saw everything. Everything. One time, somebody came to Rav Fish's house for a certain something. A fish threw him out of his house. Threw him out of his house. He threw him out of his house. Why? He said he didn't put on tefillin today. This was somebody Haredi. He says, I daven for the Amud every single day, nets in the morning. I put on tefillin every day. Avram said, you didn't put on tefillin today. He said, the Rav knows better than I do. He went to check his tefillin. He saw his tefillin were puzzled. Tefillin weren't good. But Rav didn't know it. He knew the person didn't put on tefillin. Now there's countless and countless of stories, and I'd like to continue B'ezrat Hashem, but I'd like to say one last story that I heard a couple of months ago from my very, very close friend in Yeshiva, that he was very close to Avram Fish for many years. This friend, Rav Shimon, he learns by Baal Shem Tov. He told me of the story firsthand. I begged him to tell me a story. He doesn't like saying it over because he tries to keep it, but he told me the story in the end. Baruch Hashem. He was non-religious, very, very, he believed in God, but he didn't keep Shabbat or anything. And one time, he was coming home from the army or something, I don't remember what it was. He told me he was coming home in his car, driving, and out of nowhere was one day, he knew exactly where he lived, he was usual to make, he missed his turn, and he just kept on driving. He was in his own world. He said, never happened. All of a sudden he sees Tel Aviv. He says, Tel Aviv? He says, what am I going to do in Tel Aviv? He turns off in Tel Aviv, and then he remembers. There's a tzaddik fish. He doesn't know why, it just came into his mind. He said, I heard of the tzaddik fish like once. He said, I'll go see if he's home. I don't even know if he's home. He comes to Chov Kalisher, tells me, parks his car, goes up to the door, and he says, before I knocked on the door, he said, there was somebody talking to me in my head. He said, I can't explain it. He said, it wasn't my voice. He said, I heard a voice of somebody else. And the person says to him, you have to keep Shabbos, you have to put on tefillin, and you have to do, I forgot, he told me some other, one or two other things. He told me there was 5 things that he said, he forgot one himself, and he said it was Shabbos, tefillin, one other thing, and another thing. He walks into the house. Avram is sitting there in his chair. Avram says to him the first thing, so do you hear what I tell you? Do you accept? And he's sitting there and he's like, oh my gosh. He's sitting there, he doesn't know what to do. He says, you see, never met Tzadikim. You never saw people like see, like, to talk to a person. And he stands there frozen and he's just like, yeah. And he said, that's how he became from. He said, how could I saw such holiness that he was able to talk to me. And how do I know? Because the first thing he said to me was, did you accept what I asked you? And he said, did you accept the 5 things? And he was outside the door. He said that he was sitting on the other side of the room and he heard it. It wasn't like he knew. He said, Avram Mamish was able to go into his neshama and talk to him. And he said, from then on it was that. And now, Baruch Hashem, Rav Shimon's a big person, a big tzaddik, Baruch Hashem. He sits alone day and night. The main thing from these stories, now, B'ezrat Hashem, I'd like to give more shiurim, a series of stories of these hidden tzaddikim. The main thing from these stories I'd like to say is, from my opinion, is to take obviously the love they had for Jews, for another Jew, which means obviously they had the love for HaShem. They would put themselves out for anybody, but at the same time, they tried as much as they can to remain hidden because at the end of the day, what are we? Like Avraham Avinu said, Ani Avram from the dust. I'm not even the dust, but that was the only thing he could say. We're nothing. It says in Shemona Esrei, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem. Hashem means the infinite one. Elokeinu is the one that, he's the one who, all koch, all strength that we have and everything is only because he gives it to us. Elokei Avram. I saw one of them Mukubal and bring, what should we have in mind, Elokei Avram? That even though Avram Avinu that he had such holiness in him. And he broke out of Terach's house. At 3 years old, he found godliness. He was ready to sacrifice his son. He is the father of the Jews, Elokei Avram. He wasn't able to do any of it. He was nothing. It was all HaShem. These tzaddikim live by that. They love living by that because that's the only true way and fulfilling life. And then Enechanami, the truth is when you do start living like that, then you become one with HaShem. When you become one with HaShem, HaShem gives you that koch. We know like the tzaddik has. Tzaddik demands from HaShem, and HaShem does what the tzaddik asks. HaShem made the world that way. Because HaShem wanted to show that when you come one with me, unfortunately the opposite is also true. Like it says, Hashem says about somebody who has not humbleness, somebody who's haughty, I can't be in the same room as him. These tzaddikim over and over, you'll see the stories, like in the beginning, they did anything they can, but then the Baba Sali told him he had to become famous, and when in his mind he didn't want to, and he still tried not to. And again, he still knows Melava Malka tzaddikim, because most of the stories that I just said, there's hundreds of stories in this book that I have over here, and other places which I brought from my friends, hundreds of stories, and B'ezrat Hashem hopefully will continue. It's endless, it's mind-boggling how much they looked at themselves as nothing. And we should be we should dive into Hashem, we should meet people that can show us this true way of serving Hashem in a way of pure nothing. Hashem, I need you every second. And I think that we would be to do it